I would like to come back to this question of evaluating a split. So you are in node M and you have this training data set XM that reaches that node. And you have quite a number of choices for how to split your data set and pass it on to a number of successor nodes. And so the question is, how should you do that? Which split, is the best? Just as a preparation for that, I want to say this, that decision trees are usually binary. And they might not be binary if you have categorical or discrete features, because the query you are making on such features is exactly this. Is the value in that feature for your data point, is that value V? And V, can range over all possible values. So if you have a feature having, say, 10 possible values and you want to query that feature, that would imply that after that decision node, you are going to have 10 different successors, one for each possible value in that feature. However, in practice, and this is, for example, the case with the very popular sklearn library, categorical features are in fact turned into binary features through the so-called one-hot encoding. So, in other words, instead of having a categorical feature f with v values, you are going to create or replace this feature with v binary features, and they are going to have just value 0 and 1 depending on the answer to the question, was the value in your data point v? And that's going to be 0, 1. And then you will have another encoding for another value, possible value in that feature, and so on. So in that way, if you do a one-hot encoding and you replace categorical features with this one-hot encoding, the decision trees are always going to be binary. If you have a numerical feature, then as we have seen in a previous video, the query on that node is just you pick a threshold and you ask whether in that feature you have a value lower than the threshold or higher than the threshold. So that's always going to give you just two successor nodes. So again, contributing to the idea of the binary tree. So let's take this question of evaluating a split. So the idea here is that you are in node M and you are evaluating which feature to choose and how to make a split on that feature. And so the whole sort of logic behind your choice is going to be the drop in impurity. So you can calculate the impurity of your node, and you are going to look at the impurity of the successor nodes that you create by splitting on that feature that you are considering, and you will want to see what gives you the best drop in impurity. So in node M, we have our dataset XM, and we are going to calculate the impurity, whatever impurity measure you choose for yourself in node M. And for each split that you are considering, you are going to calculate the split into, so XM is going to be split into two different sets. If you have this binary decision tree, that is most common. If not, you can have more branches. And you can calculate the impurity in node M1. And you're going to calculate the impurity in node M2. And so what you're looking at is really the drop in the impurity. So in other words, if I denote this by delta of M, so the drop in the impurity in node M for this particular split that I'm considering is going to be simply the impurity in node M, so the one before the split, minus what I got after the split. And that's the sum of the impurities in node M1 and M2. And so overall, when you compare different possibilities for splits, so you are going to choose the split with the largest drop. In impurity. So the way this is going to go is you start from your root node with the entire data set, and you are going to look at all your features and all the possible splits you can make on that feature. And for each such node, so the discussion is the same for the root node as it will be for deeper nodes in your decision tree. So for each such choice that you can make, the situation is going to be like this. You have your training data set in here, and you say, okay, for this split, I'm going to have a splitting of my data set into these two subsets. So I'm going to have a node for this subset and another node for this subset. And on one hand, I can calculate the impurity in this node, I can calculate the impurity in these two nodes, and I want to see what do I have for this split. Before the split in terms of impurity, it's just what I have in this node, and after the split, the impurity is the cumulative impurities over these two nodes. And there will be a drop in the impurity because you deal with smaller data sets, values closer to each other. You are going to choose, you can choose your splits in such a way that these are closer to purity. So there will definitely be drop for a good choice of a split. And you just take, the split that gives you the largest drop in the impurity. And by doing that, you are going to just continue splitting your internal nodes until eventually, if you have no constraint on the size of the decision tree, until eventually you are going to have just pure nodes. Or in the case of the regression, you're going to have just data points that are within, say, epsilon, and that epsilon is a parameter that you choose for yourself. For each training, or if you push it even further, you can have a leaf for each data point in your data set.